tear, it falls and hits the ground. A tree, it falls without a sound. A bird, it calls and sends you home. A man, he sits in the cold all alone.
Hi, Chris and Rob. Welcome to the Joy of Sunflowers. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please introduce yourselves a little bit more, and we'll get into it.
My name is Rob. I am coming to you live from Falmouth, Maine, or pre-recorded from Falmouth, Maine. And my wife and I lost our daughter, Lila. She was delivered stillborn December 13th, 2017. So just over 5 years ago.
And my name is Chris. I am also coming to you from Falmouth, Maine. I'm Isabel's father, and she was stillborn on July 21st of 2018, 2 days before my birthday, which I did read on your website, Ella. That unfortunately is something we have a little bit of similarity on.
Yeah, it's always just the added suck, on there when it's right next to your birthday or right on your birthday. I mean, at least we won't forget, but I don't think we will ever forget that anyway. So
it's very, my birthday has taken on a different connotation at this point. It was 2018. My birthday was spent in the funeral home, actually. So it was I think I was texting Rob all day on it. He suffered his loss about 8 months prior to me, and then Jay, who's not with us, was what, Rob, about a year before you, somewhere roughly in that area.
11 months before, yeah.
11 months. So
you're in the same general vicinity, yeah.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all within a year, and kind of like you're all sort of close together. Were you friends before, or did you come together from this experience?
Oh yeah, we were within a year and a half of all three of our losses. Jay and I, we went to college together. We roomed next door to one another our first year, which is how we met, and then we lived together all subsequent years. And the college we went to is a very small knit community, and Chris's wife went to our school, and Chris's wife's sister was one of our classmates. And so, all being in Maine, we were made aware of the fact that he and his wife had lost their daughter. And so we reached out, and then the three of us immediately started hanging out and being able to share with one another things we couldn't talk about with anyone else. And I know we'll get into that, but that was how we were connected. Jay and I, friends from college, and yeah.
Well, I mean, it's good that when you actually find some people that are close to you where you can actually meet up. I have yet to actually meet up with fellow lost mums and talk things out. And, this is really my only way of kind of connecting with as many people as I can. I live in the middle of nowhere, so there you go. On a
Welcome to Maine.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Maine's a little bit seen, I think, within the U.S. as being kind of middle of nowhere, right? Even though it's the top of nowhere.
If you go further north, it is. But I think also, this is a big. If you've seen Sad Dads, like we do a lot online. Like our primary presence is Instagram, at least from a social media standpoint, and then really the focal point of what we're doing at the moment is what we call the Lost Dad Open Hour. We currently do them once every other week on Thursdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. But that really started because Rob, Jay, and I met at a bar in downtown Portland, and we've told the story a few times, but we were three guys sitting around a table at a crowded bar with like tears in our eyes, and it was a really unique experience in the event that Jay and Rob had each other. So the order went: Jay lost his daughter, Bella, first, and then Rob lost Lila, and then I lost Isabel. So Jay was that rock for Rob. Rob and Jay were that rock for me. And it was really unique finding a group of guys where I didn't have to justify my feelings. I didn't have to explain why I was upset. I didn't have to explain things that you find yourself having to explain to people who are fortunate enough to not understand. And that's a big factor for us. I've always said, if you're lucky enough not to understand, I hope you never do. And it's really nice to find a community where you don't have to explain those feelings. And so over the course of time in this friendship, we just started talking about, well, if this works so well for us, why not see if this might work for other people as well? And that's, let me know if I'm leaving anything out, Rob, but that was kind of a big driver behind all of this.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We found that there was a boundlessness when we had the internet and what we were doing for one another and providing an outlet. It was like, well, what if there's somebody who doesn't have anybody to talk to? What if there's somebody who's struggling with a certain feeling of confliction by being sad because they lost their child and then feeling guilt because they start to feel relief or have a laugh or smile or feel good again? That is one, I always point that one out only because I think that's one of the biggest hurdles to jump over, the thought, the feeling, the notion, the affirmation that you can feel good again, that you're able to find happiness in life again, even after something so profoundly tragic and dark. But you nailed it all, Chris. I mean, it's all about creating an outlet for one another. Because we did that for each other.
That's really beautiful. I think it's really necessary as well. I mean, we said before we began this interview that women have so many different spaces, and I mean, we chat. Women, we can talk forever. So I think it's really quite easy for us to do that. Yeah. But I think for men, like, there's almost like there's set things that you're supposed to talk about, rather than the sad stuff and the stuff that we women are just like, no, you just talk about all of it, just get it all out there and let your emotions out. So how has it been, like, how has the reaction been to your page, and have you had a lot of good feedback?
Yeah, sure. So the reaction has been incredibly good. When we started the Lost Dad open hours, they were once a month. The first one probably had 7 people or so. It's since expanded to the point where we need breakout rooms. It's now twice a week. The last one went for over 3 hours. So what we found is that while the social norms kind of say, oh, be tough and everything like that, guys want to talk, and guys that you might not expect either. One of the things that I think that we came up with and do really well at the open hours are, we don't care if you speak or not. If you want to come, shut your camera off and just listen to other people tell their stories, we welcome you. I mean, if you are the wife of somebody, we don't, it's not just for men. Now predominantly that's who shows up. But just 2 weeks ago, we had somebody who showed up to the open hour who had lost their child the night before. And he showed up with his wife. And the next day they were scheduled to go to the funeral home. And the entire session, which, I don't know, Rob, probably lasted over 2 hours, was a group of guys who were not far removed from their loss themselves. We're talking 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, rallied around this individual who was walking in what I can safely describe as one of the most hellacious scenarios you could imagine the next day. And that's the type of powerful moment that occurs in these open hours, that occurs live, and has made all of this worth doing. When we started, I always said, what we're doing is, if we even help one person, this is all worth it, because it's gonna, I know having one person for me was pivotal, and the community has grown to such a point where it's clearly helping a lot of people. And I think we hoped it would get to the direction it's heading, but this first year has been incredible. And I'll let Rob go from there, because I've been talking for too long.
No, not too long at all. I think you hit on all the most important and pertinent points. And I think one thing you mentioned that is especially profound about the Lost Dads open hour is that people's willingness to actively listen is huge. It's one thing to talk, but as Chris said, like, you can come however you feel most comfortable. But even in the context where somebody does really want to share, they also want to listen. And that's where the balance is totally achieved. It feels, it's a bit surreal being in those situations with all of those incredible guys, because they're so open and they're so supportive that I've never been in a room. I know this is proverbial and virtual, like a room with such incredible individuals who are so generous with their attention, with their heart, with their vulnerability. And even if somebody is really eager to talk, they're also really eager to listen. So I think that just that balance is totally achieved, which is what makes it so special. The energy is, it's tough not to be overwhelmed by when you reflect on it and talk about it. Like, these guys are amazing who show up, and that's what makes it, like, that's what makes it a thing, is because people are willing to share, they're willing to show up, they're willing to listen, they're willing to be. And that's what we hoped for, that there would be a community, and that's what's forming right now.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Like, so like it like brings tears to my eyes a bit, it's that's so beautiful that you're creating that space for men to actually come to. And and like you said, you're open to women too, and I think that's just so important. It's definitely something that's missing.
Well, we're not creating it. Everybody who comes creates it. Like, but we're one part of it, just the same as everyone who shows up is one part of it. It's nothing if people don't show up, and we don't have anything to talk about or anything to be like moved by or taken with, unless people show up, and they show up in the way that they've been showing up. Because Chris and I can go on and on about Lucas's dad, and then other Lucas's dad, and Aisha's parents. And I mean, we can list everybody because we refer to them by their child's names, parents or dad or whomever, because we welcome anyone. And I don't know, I find myself getting overwhelmed too when I reflect upon like how special the space is.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, and to clarify Rob's point, and this is his creation. He started doing it randomly during an open hour, and it's become kind of one of our defining characteristics. So when you come to an open hour, what we found is most of the people, it's really hard to reacclimate into society after a loss like this. The description I always use is, if you've seen a movie where somebody's walking through the crosswalk and then everything's around him or her is moving in warp speed and you're stuck in that one spot. That's kind of what life after loss feels like. The world keeps moving and you get stuck in this one spot. And so one of the themes that we hear a lot is, I don't get to talk about my deceased child. So we talk a lot about, how do you address things like when people ask how many children you have, like all of these questions that get far more complicated after a loss, when people mean well, and it's standard topics of conversation, but they get trickier after a loss. So one of the themes we always talked about is not being able to say your child's name and the guilt that can be associated with it sometimes to navigate social situations. So what Rob started doing was, instead of saying, instead of saying Will or Mike, he would say Mike, Avery's father, or Will, Lucas's dad. And so everyone is known by their child who's passed. And he just did it out of nowhere, and it's really caught on. And I don't think any of us necessarily planned that or expected it, but it's become something that people really like, because they get to say and hear their child's name, whereas outside of that, network, a lot of the times they don't, as much as they'd like to.
Yeah, no, I found it very validating hearing people speak about their children and saying the names of those that they've lost. And, it is really powerful. It's something that not everyone can do, for sure, because I know a fair few people now who haven't named their losses because they couldn't bring themselves to do it.
Which is totally okay too. I mean,
yeah.
it's like we're grief is, as you said, I kind of believe that when you have grief of this magnitude, you can't really control it. I think it's kind of hardwired into people how they react to grief on this level. And so there's no great way to say it, but it's so hard to compare grief because we have these common elements, but each person's so unique and individual. So I know exactly what you're saying. And we have people, I think most of the people have named in our group, if not all, but we've come
Yeah, but
across.
yeah. No, go. Sorry, Chris.
Oh, that was it.
Just yeah, same of like if we I think we are hypersensitive to the fact that, as you were saying, the people grieve differently, the people's journeys are different. We just want to be alongside as much as we possibly can in the best role that we can. And so definitely something that we keep in mind in terms of when people are introducing themselves. We do introductions in the beginning of each Lost Ads open hour. And we ask people to share only if they want to, and whatever they feel like or don't feel like is fine. Because again, it's like it no one wins, no one gets any. You can only get out of it what you want to, and what you want to give is all you can. And so in that way, it's like you have to listen to yourself. And I think a lot of people hold themselves to unfair standards to be like, well, I should be doing this because I heard about this person doing that. It's like, well, it's not that simple. If that worked for that person, doesn't mean it's going to work for you. If going to a virtual open hour and talking and saying the name of your child works for one person, that doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So if being there without your camera on and just listening to all these other guys babble on works, then great. Like, you don't have to share, you don't have to do or be anything other than what you feel. And I think that a lot of people have trouble with that. But I think that when they come to our space, hopefully they feel that that is truly like the embraced approach to it. Because we have some people who do show up and just don't put their camera on, which I'm like, awesome, cool. Because I don't want to turn people off to the fact that there are so many with their camera on talking. I want there to also be those people who can hopefully get something out of feeling as though they can just be there.
Yeah.
Well, Ella, you brought.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, you brought it up earlier. Some people don't like talking about it, but you want to feel like they're not alone. And there's always one quote that stuck with me that I think a guy named Matt, who comes to every meeting, great guy, lives in Boston.
Lily's
he said, dad. Yep, it's Lily's dad. So basically, he said one thing that's always stuck with me, and I think sums up the open hours very well. The first meeting he came, he said he wanted to see a future version of himself. And he said that because Jay, Rob, and I are all around 5 years, a little bit plus out from our loss. Most guys who come are the first year. Some are just passing that milestone. And what that meant to me, what made it so powerful, is that all he was saying was, I want to know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I want to know I'm going to be able to live again. And I want to see that other people have navigated this. And that's really why we love doing the open hours.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's I've definitely enjoyed seeing not enjoyed, but like I've felt comfort in seeing women who are 20 years ahead, or like 5 years, 10 years ahead, because it's like, that whole, okay, what can I expect to be feeling, thinking, is how is this going to affect me in the future? And I mean, even with that, like, we're all different. It's going to be different for each person. Like, we have the same emotions in terms of like the stages of grief and all those things, but how we end up and how we let it change us really just depends on how we want to be changed by it. I've really started to notice that in people, when you actively want it to change you in a good way, and you actively seek to grieve and to move through, I think that's when you see fruit, and you can see beauty in the dark, bleak places, even when you don't want to.
It's very difficult to. I mean, yeah, go ahead. No, you take it.
No, go ahead. I was just saying, I was reiterating like super hard because you said very difficult. I said super hard. Now you go. And
oh, okay. Well, and you summed it up perfectly, Ella. It's the goal is to get to, everyone's working towards that same end goal of being happy again, seeing that light at the end of the tunnel. But as you said, it's everyone takes such a different path to get there. And, you know, you have milestones along the way. I know for me, my wife, I mean, that one of the big themes we talk about is the different grief patterns of men and women in here. And, you know, I can only speak to my own experience, but my wife couldn't be around newborns. I really struggled with toddlers. And it's different reasons, because I always pictured, you know, playing tennis with my daughter, running around with my daughter. So whenever I would see a toddler, I would picture what I lost and the memories I wouldn't be able to form. And for her, it was infants, and she was fine around toddlers. And, you know, we always talk about how we're not therapists. We are not professionals. We don't pretend to be. As a matter of fact, we stress that we aren't. We can only share our own experiences. And yeah, I'm sure it's topics that you probably hit on as well, just the different grief cycles of men and women, and, you know, maybe how they impact relationships and everything like that. We tackle those subjects to the best of our ability quite often.
Did you want to say
We're the
something?
expert. I was just going to say, only because Chris reminded me, we are the experts of our own grief, though. Nobody knows our grief better than we do. And we keep saying that we're not experts, like, sure, not like clinically or medically, but in terms of what we know of ourselves. And I think that everybody again, going back to the LDOH, Lost Dads open hours, like, everybody knows what they feel. They're steadfast in what they feel, and they let it out. They let it in, or they accept it in. And it's tough, though. I mean, it's just like unrelenting and unpredictable, and emotionally exhausting, but it's life now.
Yeah, it is. It's life now. I think you know, what you say is really true, like in terms of, you know, we're all experts of our own experience, but then, you know, you'd be amazed at how much you do know about grief and the grieving process, and how much you've kind of learned from listening to all these different stories and these different like experiences and how they've dealt with their grief. Because like I started writing some things down the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I've actually taken on a lot of this information and a lot of this, you know, pain and also hope and joy that you know has come through these journeys. And I mean, I don't know how many hours they say you need to do something to be an expert, but you know, I mean,
10,000.
how many?
10,000.
10,000. So
That's what I've heard.
we're far off, but you know, when you start writing it down, you're like, wow, like there's a lot that I'm learning here. Like there's a lot of things that, you know, and even the experts aren't really experts when it comes to loss, unless they've been through it themselves. Because, you know, there's only so much you can get from books. There's only so much you can get from hearing it from someone else. If you haven't experienced it yourself, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to understand and know what this is. Because, you know, I knew about loss. I knew about like losing babies and stuff, and like people going through miscarriages and stillborns and all that stuff. But then until I lost my last two pregnancies, I didn't know anything really about it, to be honest, because then it happened and I was like, wow, okay. You know, and something dies inside.
Yeah. There's a darkness that prevails, and there's a part of you that never sees the world the same again, because you can hear about it all you want, but you don't live it. And once you live it, it becomes part of your life. And until it is part of your life, you don't have such a profound understanding of it.
Yeah, so true. Can we go into some of your story, Rob, and then Chris? We'll do it in sort of order of time. Mine have all been within the year. So I had 2 losses last year, but it was within this time span. So I'm not even a year out.
Well, I saw that, and our condolences to you. I know you're coming up on, I think I saw it was in May. So I know it's probably a tricky time of year for you. So our heart goes out to you.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I've made the live event for the 6th, because I was like,
Mm-hmm.
5th is going to be a hard day, and I know Mother's Day is hard for most women as well. So I was like, makes sense to do it the weekend before, because then they can kind of experience Mother's Day however they want to experience that. But at least we've got this to kind of like give them something.
Right.
But yeah,
Oh.
All right,
take
Rob, you want to go?
it.
Yeah. So my wife and I mean, my wife carried Lila up until it was like 37 and a half, 38-ish weeks point. Totally normal pregnancy, everything tested out and seemed entirely fine until then it wasn't. When we were going every week at that point, and I'm so glad that I went to every appointment because there was no heartbeat at that 38-week appointment. And I remember being in the first room where we were in, and they used like a wand, just sort of, it was very casual seeming. We've been in that room a ton of times. It was like she would just sit there, she had her belly, and they would find the heartbeat, and I knew what sound to listen for. And I remember like too much time going by before I heard anything. And they were like, hold on, okay, like, maybe, we're gonna go in the other room and do like a proper ultrasound. And same same outcome, no heartbeat. Pardon me. Oh boy, that's an unsightly sound. But yeah, it was surreal and dreamlike and traumatic and terrible. And the subsequent 3 days were spent in the hospital with our daughter Lila after she was delivered, stillborn. And I think, to me, the toughest part is thinking about the time that we spent with her until we couldn't spend any more time with her, because it was the point at which your child is starting to no longer resemble your child. And that part gets me every time I think about it. And it's a big part of the reality of, I think, the trauma that I have around it. Um, but it was also like amazing to spend that time with her and to actually be with her and to have like a physical experience with her is so special and profound. But really difficult because you leave the hospital without your child. And we were lucky that the hospital did a really good job. And I say this because a lot of the dads we've talked to, we've been able to hear about their experience. And, they're next door, sandwiched between hospital rooms that have living children on either side. So they're hearing cries, and the deafening silence that you endure when you don't have a living child is pretty surreal, profound, and exceptional, I would say. Um, and after we lost Lila, we wanted to expand our family, and we tried and tried, and it just wasn't happening. And it was a constant roller coaster of, there's hope this month. Okay, I think I feel the way that I felt when I was pregnant the first time. Okay, I'm not pregnant. And to the point where we dealt with infertility and ended up having to go through IVF, that, as anybody who has been through IVF knows, and I say been through it, like I've been there for it, like I didn't go through it, and I had no idea what it entailed and how involved it was and how incredibly complicated it is, and how it's also not a sure thing. And so my wife and I had to have the very real conversation at a point of like, hey, if it's just the two of us, is that okay? Is that going to be enough? Because we both want a child and or children so badly, but I don't know. We are lucky, very lucky right now to have a healthy 3.5-year-old little boy named Dallas, who is the total light of our lives. But there was no guarantee, and it was so draining and exhausting and frustrating and maddening to think that we lost her when maybe she was going to be it, like that was going to be our only child. But all this to say, I could go on for ages and hours about it because there's so much that I feel around it and that I still recall, and things that I remember at times that I haven't even remembered since being there that day over 5 years ago. But we got treated really well by the hospital staff in Maine, and I'm grateful for that. That was a big part of it that I would be remiss if I didn't mention. But it was the beginning of a very difficult period that ended for us in a very eventual happy situation to be able to have a living child. And I think that I don't presume that I love my child any more than a parent loves their child. But I think that if you lose a child and then you have a living child, that you do, you have a different perspective. There's just no way around that. And I don't say that to be elitist. I don't say that to be preachy or holier than thou or any sort of like it's just true. Like you have a different perspective. I look at my son differently than I would have if I hadn't lost my daughter.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you and completely resonate. I had three living children before I had my two losses, and I after I had the two losses, I was like, I wasn't grateful enough. I wasn't like, I didn't look at my kids enough and realize the miracle that they are. And I think that is the case with a lot of women who have a living child and then they go through loss. They look at that living child so much differently, like so different from what they did before. So I totally agree. I think people who have been through loss and then they have a child, I think there is a very big difference in how they handle and how they hold their child, because there's just so much more gratitude, I think. And it can often be taken for granted when you're just like, oh, I just had a baby, just got pregnant, and so and I've had both experiences now. So
Yeah.
I was one of those annoying people who just got pregnant.
Oh, not annoying. There's no I hope no one ever. It's a terrible perspective to have because it's rooted in such profound tragedy, and so I would wish it upon no one. It's
Oh
just
no. Yeah.
it's totally just what I that this is my reality. Like, this is what I know. I have a difficult introduction to being a parent, to put it mildly, as does Chris, because Izzy was his first.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, it's definitely true. Like and that's something I've always told myself after I had the losses, because I was like, well, we're all just, in this journey, we're doing our best. We're not, no one comes into it to fail, right? We're not actually trying to fail on purpose at being a parent and actually being grateful for what we have. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. And not like, one of the things I constantly tell myself, because I had the problem with the newborns a little bit, like where I'd see someone pregnant or with a baby, but there was always that thought in my head of, I'd never want them to ever go through what I went through. And that thought of, I'm so glad that they can have a baby. Like, I'm so glad that they're pregnant. So yeah, there was some self-talk going on, and there was some moments, but it did get straight away, like instantly just changed, because I just didn't want anyone to go through this pain.
Right.
So. But yeah, Chris, did you want to share your story?
Yeah, so it's a shame Jay's not here tonight, because Rob and I have similar stories in that Lila was his first, or is his first, and Isabel is my first. Jay's different. Jay had a living child at home when he lost Bella. So the whole dynamic, we've talked about it actually a lot, like the whole dynamic, and we talk about it in the open hours, how that does shift the dynamic, and how you look at your living child. And then we are also lucky enough to have two rainbow babies after the loss, Annie and Maisie. And I would say patience. Like, as Rob says, like, you look at your kid like crying at night doesn't bother you, or things like that. Just things that take on a different meaning. But I just think that's a great point that you brought up. I wish Jay was here to share his story as well. Maybe another time before this airs. But so Like Rob, my wife had a very, what they would call a normal pregnancy. I was not at every um, appointment, unfortunately, unlike Rob. I'd started a new job. I was at a firm where you had to hit your billable hours, so everything was normal. I kept being told all's well, don't worry about it. And then at around 37 or 38 weeks, I remember my wife calling me because I'm paraphrasing all this. I didn't carry the baby, so I don't understand these things, but she had come to learn like what foods made Isabel move and like what she would do to feel, Isabel kick or be connected to her. Um, and I remember she called me once and she drank a milkshake, and that had always been the thing that made Isabel move and um, get excited. And she called me and she was like, "Well, I had it. I didn't feel her. I'm starting to worry about it." And I was like, "Well, the doctor said space restricts at the end, and everything's been fine, so let's not worry about it." So the next morning, I went to work, and she was like, "I think I'm just gonna go in and have them check. I'm getting worried. I still haven't felt her." And I was like, "Okay." And this, to be fair, she'd done this once before, and it was fine. Um, and her sister was up visiting, and so her sister just said, I'll go with her, and we'll meet you for lunch afterwards." And I went to work. Um, then the phone rang, and it was her sister, and she couldn't talk, like just couldn't get words out. Eventually just choked out, "You need to get here now." And so it's one of those things. I'm sure Rob can attest to this, and we've talked about it before. You hope, but you hope you're not wrong, but logically, it's like, what else could it be at that point? It's like, but you don't want to admit it to yourself. So I don't really remember the car ride over there. And I walked into the doctor's office and gave them my name, and the faces at the front desk gave me, you just knew immediately. And then it gets even worse. I mean, Rob saw it in real time, and I can't imagine doing that. And, you know, I feel guilty because I wasn't there when my wife found out. So she found out. Thankfully, her sister was there, but I wasn't. And that's something that's always going to, I don't know if haunt's the right word, but it's always going to be something that I regret. And I know logically I didn't do anything wrong, but it's still really hard to live with. Um, and then what do you do from there? I didn't know. And so what did I turn around and ask the doctor? I just said, "What the hell do we do now?" And when they said gave birth, my jaw almost dropped. It hadn't even crossed my mind that now there's going to be a delivery of a child that we've just been told has passed away. Um, and I've always known this, but Rob and I have said this before, and so has Jay. You watch an experience like that, and I just thoroughly believe women are infinitely tougher than men. I know that's like, I can laugh about it now, but I say that in all seriousness. Um, Watching my wife deliver, knowing what was on the other side of that, and I know Rob and his wife had to do the same, and Jay and his wife had to do the same, and everyone who's gone through losses like this have had similar experiences. Um, and still, like, I still wouldn't allow myself to blow. Maybe they're wrong. Until they were out, it was like the full acceptance wasn't there, even though you knew it was coming. Um, and then we spent about 12 to 24 hours, I think, with Isabel, and actually wrote about it on the webpage. It's still one of the stories. I can barely tell it without choking up. The concept of watching your child be wheeled out of the hospital room, knowing it's the last time you'll ever see them, is horrifying. It's a horrifying experience that I truly never wish on anybody. Um, and we talk about it a lot. It's so when you were talking about the baby announcements and the social media, it's funny. Like you, I don't wish it on anyone. I look at it and I just say, I hope so. Like, I hope so. I hope, like, when you say at month 3 coming in August, I'm like, yeah, I hope you're right. Because as we all know, once it happens to you, you know what can go wrong. So the innocence and excitement of pregnancy, even if you do try later, is gone. So yeah, that was uplifting, huh?
Yeah.
That's that.
Instead of an if, it becomes instead of a when, it becomes an if, right?
Yeah,
Like, you get
that's a
pregnant.
great way to describe it. That's a great way to say it. Yep.
Yeah, I am right now pregnant, 28 weeks. And
Congratulations. I know you're probably
Yeah.
terrified at the same time, but
Oh,
congratulations.
yeah.
you hold on to the hope. Um,
Yep.
but that has been a very interesting, like it's really been a very interesting experience, because I had this thing in my head. All I need to do is get pregnant again. Like, I just want that baby. Like, if I get pregnant again, I'll feel better. Like, I'll just, I'll still feel the loss, obviously, but I'll feel better. Like, things will be easier, right? And then obviously we got pregnant, and now I'm dealing with pregnancy after loss, for the second time, because I actually lost the first one after loss. But yeah, this has gotten further than those losses. So you don't stop worrying the whole time. And
Yeah.
the experience is so random. So how was your pregnancy after loss experience? Are you guys able to talk for longer? Because I'm good to go for longer if you guys can.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
probably have like 15 more minutes
Okay.
or so. Or, I mean, whatever. Whenever we
So
finish,
if
we
you have
finish.
15
But
more minutes, I'll ask you first then. How did you deal with the loss? And then going into pregnancy after loss, what was that experience like, and how did you kind of deal with that? Like, what were your strategies, your ways of kind of moving through?
yeah, so a lot of different. I mean, you can do full hours on a lot of these different subjects: how you deal with the loss, how you how you approach the next pregnancy, how you deal with the next pregnancy, how you deal as the well, I mean, whatever. But so in general, um, the loss, like you'd expect, was really hard. We came back to a house we had just bought 2 months earlier, had a nursery set up. Uh, the hospital blanket we had ordered for Isabel, because she was 37 and a half weeks, so she was a little earlier. Unfortunately, the day we got back from the hospital after losing her was the day that decided to arrive. My wife had an infection, and it was tough. It was very tough. A lot of therapy, I guess, is the best way I'd say it. I mean, one of the things Sad Dads is working on right now is becoming a nonprofit. Jay, our paperwork's in. Jay, Rob, and I are fortunate enough, um, to have access to quality mental health professionals, and we're pretty open that you got to find the right fit, but it was extremely helpful to us to go for professional therapists. And my wife and I saw the same person, then we saw that same person individually, then we saw different people. So there was a lot of work that went into it. But that was the primary driver of becoming a nonprofit over here, in that we do want to be able to fundraise to pay for mental health services and time off work for families that might not be as fortunate to have had the access that we did. And that was a long way of saying that there was a lot that went into those therapy sessions and how you coped and how you approached. But I truly can't stress enough that for my wife and I, it was very helpful to go down that path for dealing with it. Like you, my wife was all about, I got to get pregnant again. I'm going to be okay once I'm pregnant again. We have a very different experience than Rob, in that we were blessed that we did not have infertility issues. So we didn't have the struggle and the ups and downs that Rob and his wife had. She got pregnant relatively quick. In that, actually, our rainbow baby was born less than a year after we lost Isabel. So the timing was, she gave birth twice in under a year, which to me is still remarkable. Um,
I mean, real
it,
talk, that's Herculean.
it's truly remarkable. But like you said, that was her coping mechanism in the beginning. Now she did all the therapy and all these other things as well, but she really just needed to be pregnant again. That presented its own challenges of, once you're in the pregnancy. And then unfortunately we did learn some things about the first pregnancy, and there were placental issues. So she had to inject herself twice a day with shots, and the doctor's appointments obviously are much more frequent as you're now considered high risk. All things that actually were helpful to her, believe it or not. They were nuisances, but I think it gave her that element of control, and like she was doing everything in her power to make sure this was a different outcome. I don't want to speak for her, but I think that helped her. Um, we did still end up getting rushed in with our rainbow baby Annabelle. We the heartbeat was low, and there was a fluid issue at the end of what was going on, and so they gave her steroids, and Annabelle was born early as well. Um, but yeah, that, and the third pregnancy was much like the second, same stress, um, but still highly monitored. So it's yeah. I mean, I guess that was I probably talked too long on that, but that was kind of the journey from loss to, fortunately having our two rainbow babies.
No, I think that's pretty much it. Like when you are going through it as a woman anyway, you do kind of like think, one, that you're going to feel better, and two, yeah, when you're in it, you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, a lot of us say we wouldn't mind going to some retreat somewhere and just being monitored the whole time. So yeah, having more monitoring and more uh doctor's appointments would sometimes be helpful to some women. I mean, for me, I've been avoiding the doctors because it stresses me.
Mm-hmm.
It stresses me out going there, and I've just been avoiding it. I only go when I'm worried. So,
My
um,
my wife just expects to hear bad news, so she's like that. She doesn't like going, and she's getting ACL surgery in a week from today. So unfortunately, there's been a lot of doctors as of late.
yeah, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that she's going through that, and I hope she can have her mind settled, because I know how stressful going for appointments and knowing when things are going to happen can be. So yeah. Um,
Well,
is there is there anything that you guys do for your first the stillborn, the lost?
Like tradition,
Just,
like
yeah, to sort of honor it. Like not everyone does. That's why I'm asking. Is there anything that you guys do?
this is it. I mean, Sad Dads Club is what this is all about. It's like being able to talk about them regularly with people who actually know who they are. I think that Lila's brought up more by the dads and families on the Lost Dads open hour than that is by my own family. I mean, I don't say that as a slight to my family. I know they do think about her and they acknowledge her and they mourn her, but she's talked about more in this context. And so in a way, I, it, I think that's what we do for them. And that's, I think, why everybody shows up, is for that child that otherwise is, in some cases, tragically not thought of as real, because they didn't get any time on this planet. Like their time on this planet was like, you get here and you're gone. Like it couldn't have been shorter. It's just not scientifically possible to have been any shorter. And that's so tragic for us, because they were so real to us. They were so profoundly impactful to us. And they were such a big part of our lives and always will be. And I think for the, friends and family, it's tough. I feel it's an impossible task as a family member or even a close friend of somebody who has gone through one of these losses, and to have it be part of your family and to not really understand it because it's not directly you. I'm generalizing now. I know my parents, they bring up Lila, but not as much as these guys do, not as much as these dads do. I don't say her name around nearly as many people or as often as I do. So that's why I think that um, I don't have any specific tradition. Getting back to your original question, I just have a legacy that I think that is more so what I'm hoping to incorporate her in, that all these guys and dads and families and wives and partners are helping me solidify, helping us solidify.
Yeah, no, that is it. That's part of, yeah, that's honoring her and honoring what you've gone through, and helping so many people go through what they're going through too.
I think one of the, and actually it's not just us. I mean, as Rob said, like this is in honor of all of our daughters, but not just us three, right? So like the other individuals and members who come to these open hours, they all say the same thing. They want to talk about their children. They do this for their children. They want the tragedy of their story to help somebody else down the road. Um, and they're all doing a fantastic job at it. You know, unfortunately, as we're all acutely aware of, this is going to keep happening. Whether it be miscarriage, stillbirth, infant loss, SIDS, we've come across a lot of it. And I think the powerful moments we're seeing is as people get further and further removed from the loss and are doing this work, whether it be through sad dads, as a tangent to therapy or whatever work they're doing to work through it, uh, they're going to be able to help people down the line, and they're doing that because they're honoring their child as well, and that's always what we had hoped this would develop into, and it's exciting to watch. In terms of actual like what our family does, it's the second year we've done it, and it's only because our now almost 4-year-old started to, you know, we haven't broached, she knows Isabel, but she doesn't fully comprehend the story or understand any of it yet, nor probably should she at 4 just yet. Um, just because I don't think she'd be able to comprehend it even if we told her. But the last 2 years, she's taken a birthday balloon out on Isabel's birthday and released it, and tries to send it up into heaven to Isabel. So, you know, that's been the tradition for the last 2 years. It's been a nice one. It actually happened by accident because she actually just let a balloon go by accident 2 years ago, and that's why it happened. And then this year was planned. But I think what Rob said is spot on. We're all here solely because of our kids, and anything we can do to help honor other people's children, give them a space to be heard. This is people talk about Sad Dads Club and, you know, founders and things like that, and we're pretty adamant. Like all we did was create a place and put out a Zoom link, and everyone who shows up is what makes this. We didn't even do anything on camera for a long time because we just didn't want to. Yeah, these guys are legitimately friends at this point. Like we talk offline, we're planning retreats into the Maine woods. There's a Discord channel that people stay connected with outside of meeting times, and it's really developed into this full-fledged community, and it's just been a great experience from really tragic beginnings.
Yeah, that's so lovely. And you know, I resonate with that so much because I said to my husband, I was like, I don't really feel like what I'm doing is mine. I said, because it's not. You know, I'm talking to all these people, and you know, without talking to other people, there wouldn't be an event, there wouldn't be what I'm trying to create, because there you know, there wouldn't be any stories, there wouldn't be anyone sharing. And it's the strength and the courage of people like you who come forward and say, yes, I want to share this story, I want to you know, honor my child and say their name, and I don't want to not, say about what happened. And yeah, sometimes it's very confronting. But it's really beautiful when people do come forward and share their stories.
We're all doing it together. I can go down this entire list. I'm looking at notes that I took from the last Lost Dads Open Hour, and I can say every single dad's child's name. And I'm so proud of that, and I'm so happy about that, and I'm so just grateful to have all these people. I mean, Will, Lucas, Millen, Liam, Spencer, Parker, Greg, Sloan, Justin, Paxton, Mike had
Well, now you're committed to the whole list. So now you got to finish. You can't leave someone out.
Yeah, that's like, you didn't say my kid's name. What are you doing?
Well,
Yeah,
it's a list of only people who've got me. Yeah, I wish I had more time, but gosh, yeah. I mean, I think everybody who is showing up talking about it, or at least not even talking about it, everybody who is just being and engaging is part of it, and we should all give ourselves credit for that, like that we are showing up and we're being present and we're engaging in whatever way works best for us, and that's if again, as Chris said, like if we can help one person, fantastic. If we can help 10 people, even better. If we can help 20 people, oh my goodness, 30 people, whoa, 40, let's keep going. Like, let's not stop trying to help people and trying to create relief is the toughest thing to find when you feel like you're in a box of grief and pain. You feel trapped and you feel like you have no out, and you're just constantly being like, I don't know of any better way to describe it than just like being hit with trauma over and over, and you need to be able to release it. You have to be able to talk to people. You have to be able to connect. And if you can't do that, then it's detrimental. It's terrible. You don't have
Yeah.
to be a medical professional to know that.
Well, and it's a weird feeling, right? Because, I think if a year ago you told us Sad Dads would go from 0 to over 2,500 in about a year on Instagram, not that 2,500 is some monumental following, but, it's a pretty specific group that, you don't just stumble across Sad Dads. And the irony of a group like this is nobody chooses it. Nobody wants to be there. And so numbers going up isn't good. Like the ultimate goal, I remember somebody who worked in the nonprofit world said to me, it's like, the irony about my job is if I'm successful, I put myself out of business. They were talking about homelessness and food. So it was more prevalent, or relevant to what they were saying. But, the sad part is with each new follower, I mean, somebody's been through a loss, and all we can do is hope to provide a safe space for them to try and cope with that loss, because that loss unfortunately has occurred and there's a need that develops. So for us, when we were talking about Sad Dads, we just didn't see anything like that developed. So all we really did was do what the three of us did in a bar and bring it online. And
Yeah.
It's been surreal. And I truly consider all of these people my friends at this point. I've gotten 6 texts from people in the group while sitting here. So I consider myself extremely lucky to know these people, even though it's through the worst. We always say it's worst club, best guys. That's our Instagram slogan. That's our handle. And it's true.
Yeah, worst club, best members, and that's what I think a lot of us say now in the lost space. Because it really is. We can say it's all horrible and ugly, but there is some beauty in there, and that is the connections that we form, and that sort of compassion that we have towards each other, and the love. Like there's so much love. I don't know if you guys have felt that, like just love so much from everyone who's gone through this.
Unbelievable. I mean, yeah, that has been, I think, a huge silver lining for all of us, has been the connections and the fact that we're able to laugh together and create a space that is so just fun to be in, because it scratches like every itch. Like you You get to laugh, you get to cry, you get to lament, you get to do all of the things, as the kids say.
Yeah.
Did you just say lament?
Yeah.
I did say lament. You can lament. There's a lot of lamenting going on in those LDOHs, let me tell you, from myself as well.
Yeah, I've been very shocked about how much we can laugh. Like even over some of the really horrible things that people have said, or like horrible things that doctors have done, or just all of it, it's been really quite amazing to see that you can feel a lot of different emotions in one moment.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel joy and laughter and like, have that love as well, and then also feel really distraught, upset, and grieved by what you're saying as well. It's so strange to feel that.
It's surreal.
Well, we talked, oh, good.
No, that was all I was just.
Oh,
surreal.
I was going to say, we talked about that. So actually, there was a point in our last open hour, which went for 3 hours, that somebody in the group, a guy named Albert, actually made a comment that he pointed out that like the tone, it was very upbeat. And he said it not because he was being, downtrodden or trying to bring down the mood. There was a ton of new people last open hour. And what he was pointing out was, he was like, this isn't how this always runs. Like, this is a great group of guys who have formed a bond so that we can cry and laugh and yell and scream, and we can do it in the course of 30 seconds. And I hadn't even thought about it because I'd become so used to that atmosphere with these guys. But I didn't even remember, like, it was great for him to point out, because we have 10 people who are sitting there thinking, like, why are these guys so happy? Like, we're here for a bad reason. And
then somebody did chime in to be like, I'm actually really glad that, yeah.
And they've jumped on Discord and become a massive participant in the group. So, it's spot on. Like, it's, this is a really crappy situation that brought us all here, but people don't want to live in that dark cloud forever. They want to see, and it's not always appropriate. There are days where it's not appropriate. Like the day when that individual lost their child the day before, there was not laughing on that session. But yeah, I mean, that was, I don't know why I said that, but I know
That was
I know it related to something you said at first.
Is being able to laugh, and I feel like we laughed, as you said, more than we ever did on that last session that went 3 hours, and it did become a point to which that was probably the highest number of new dads we'd ever seen in like a single like standalone session. Like there were at least like 5 new dads, and that's why
I think there were like 10.
That's like he was like, hey, this isn't always how it is. But then I think Brad chimed in and he was like, I'm actually glad to see this because this is really important. I think Brad from Missouri, right? I could be wrong. I hope I'm not wrong.
A couple people, I think 2 people said it too. I'll have to remember. And then the other, unless you have other things, before we wrap up, I do want to point out, and it would be a huge mistake if Rob and I didn't mention this. I mean, your affiliation with Sunflowers is really big in Sad Dads, actually. So we have multiple members whose sunflowers are their symbol for their lost child. So if you look at our Discord or these chat chains we have, there's emojis of sunflowers all over them. And what you're trying to build, I think, is incredible. And I just wanted to shout out you for doing all this. Thank you for having us on. Shout out Mike for the sunflower connotations, and this is.
Hey, be strong.
I didn't mean to stop it on you, by the way. If you have questions, we can keep going. I don't know how this is edited.
Yeah. So, I mean, usually I just sort of ask, is there anything that you'd want to say to anyone who's in the throes of it right now and they're really struggling and they're in the depths of, grief? Is there anything that you'd kind of want to say to them to kind of help them? through.
You wanna go first, Rob?
I would say when you're ready, connect with someone, make a connection. As alone as you feel and as desperate as you feel, like there are people there who will make you feel better, even if you don't feel like feeling better is a possibility. It is. And there are people who are out there, as hopeless and as dark as it seems. And I get it. I get it. Even having a support right there. A friend of mine who had endured a loss 11 months earlier, like I still felt very hopeless, but it's also okay to be sad. It's okay to be mad. Those aren't bad feelings. Those are feelings. And those are the only two grand pieces of advice or nuggets of wisdom that I have.
No, it's so important, I think, like with emotions, we do go, oh no, they're the bad emotions, but they're not bad. They're there for a reason. We feel them for a reason. It's an outlet. We have to let them out.
Gotta feel it to heal it.
Chris,
Oh, I
anything?
like that.
Yeah, feel it to heal it. Yeah. Put it on a
So I
t-shirt.
would say, I mean, for people in the throes of it, I can say, I can only speak what worked for me. So my recommendation for the people in the throes of it is, as Rob covered most of it, if you are up to it, definitely connect and find individuals who are living the same story. They are out there, whether it's us or another group or a friend who's lived it. It's pretty important to not feel alone. As I said, for me, therapy worked very well. So if you are in a position to do that, I would recommend it. But mostly, if you are in the throes of it, what I would tell to anyone is you're not going to believe me, but it does get better. It takes time. It can take work. It does take work, but eventually it gets better. So when we first started this, I always said in the initial stages, you go second by second, and then that slowly turns to minute by minute, and then you get to hour by hour, and then you hope to get to day by day. I still think about my daughter every day. So to each their own. I've never gotten past day by day, but that doesn't mean life doesn't get better. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. Reach out if you need help. We're here to listen. I'm sure there's plenty of people, hopefully in your network, that will listen. But it gets better. Take time, but it does.
Yeah, and I think what you said was really important as well. Like you still think about her every day, and that's, that is still, you still come through your grief. It's just that grief doesn't leave us. We can get to that acceptance phase. We can get to that point where, we know, and not every day is miserable, but it's still gonna be there. Like our child is still there. They're in our heart. We're gonna continually think about them and have them with us. So don't think that loss is going to be one of those things where, I've just, I'll stop thinking about it and stop thinking about my child, and I'll only think about them on those days. You're going to think about your child like all the time because they're your child. And when you have a child as well, then you're like always reminded anyway, every day, because you're thinking, well, Joy, or like for me, my child's name is Joy, and Patience, so both of those I think of when I look at my kids. I'm just like, it would be so much different to have another, to have more. So I think, just knowing that coming through grief is not forgetting, is not moving past everything, is not never being triggered again. You will have moments. There will be hard days. Before we go, how have you guys been with your tough days? And is there anything that you've done to kind of move through them?
Bench pressing.
Actually,
Definitely
yeah, you do a lot of that.
Love that.
Yeah, you do a lot of that now. Yeah, yeah. I
That's
don't
fun.
bench press.
You
Yeah,
paddle.
well, there's a reason that he doesn't have sleeves on and I do.
Right.
But no, it's I don't know if there's anything
Flexing.
because I can't. Um,
Oh,
but no, no, I mean I wish I could say there was something, but it really depends on what it was, right? Like as I think as you said, like there are certain triggers, and I would say that the major triggers don't occur like they once did. Minor triggers, like as I said, sometimes like a minor trigger would be you see like the pregnancy announced on social media, and my initial gut reaction is like to tense up. And I'm like, all right, well, that's that's I've kind of learned to manage those. A lot of the triggers we've talked about is when somebody says something accidentally insensitive to you. Um, and it's not because they mean harm, it's just because they don't know any better. Those were major triggers that were difficult at the beginning, and those took a long time to learn how to manage. And I'm not going to give advice on those because those are so uniquely personal to people that I don't. It's by naive for me to even talk about how people should handle that. Um, but yeah, I guess being 5 years out, I don't have any like specific like action items I do anymore. Before it would just be I would try to prep myself for the situation. Like if I knew I was walking into a situation where it could occur, I would try to mentally prepare or just not go. Um, those days are gone, but in the early days, I would say I tried to be very aware of surroundings I was walking into, and that can be incredibly difficult sometimes. And when you get blindsided, not expecting it, can be when things really take a tumble.
Yeah.
I probably didn't answer your question at all.
No, that does answer it, because you're right. It is a really personal thing. Like I've asked a few people, what do you say when someone asks you, how many kids you have? Because that's something that, I mean, I don't really go out very often since my losses. I probably should do that. But it's something I'm scared someone's going to ask me, and I'm going to be like, I don't three. And then the two children I lost, then what? They're still
Rob, we talk. This comes up a lot. Rob, you can tell what we say, and a lot of guys around us have been saying it.
and more directly, or rather, in addition to bench pressing, in serious, not that that was an unserious answer, it just sounded jovial, and it was because it's truth, but it's also funny. But I do also give myself a lot of patience and time and like grace to just it took a long time for me to get to the point where I would actually allow myself to be like okay with not knowing what to say or how to act or to remove myself from situations. And I think that then manifested into what Chris was alluding to and mentioning, which was actually not putting yourself in a situation where you knew that you were going to feel uncomfortable because you were putting yourself and your feelings in front of somebody else's perception, which is unfounded because they've never endured a loss. So they don't know. And you're the first to wish that you didn't have to make that decision or remove yourself from something that was otherwise celebratory, like a baby shower or something. It's like, no, fuck that. I mean, pardon my French, but it's like I'm not gonna do that. Like, no way. But I have just for a long time, I mean, for 4 years after losing Lila, I didn't talk about it and I didn't mention her. And if I were asked if I had kids, I'd say no. And only since Dallas, my son, was born, and people ask me, and since engaging with this community for the Lost Dads Club, and uh, Sad Dads Club is the name of it. I just got the marketing totally wrong. Look at that. Sad Dads Club, ever since engaging with that community and having my son healthy and alive and here with me born, did anytime I am asked how many children I have, I say I have a son who's 3.5 years old and my daughter would have been 5, like she passed away 5 years ago. Not to create discomfort, not because or maybe it is to create it has to be to create discomfort because I know that they thought they were asking an innocent question, but it's a loaded question. And it could be to anybody for any number of reasons. For somebody who doesn't have any kids because they can't have any kids, like that could be, oh, do you have kids? It's like, no, but not by choice. And I think it's just creating greater awareness around what that question can. If you want to ask it, you better be ready for the answer. And like, I don't give a fuck. I'm sorry, I'm getting really sailor mouthy here, but I don't care anymore about. I will never leave her out of context when there's an opportunity to talk about her. And I say, my son Dallas, he's 3.5. My daughter Lila would have been 5.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've had a few different people say some things, and one of them I quite liked as well. Like, I like your approach. I think that just because then it's just one thing that you're going to say, because some people have several different things. So one person said, not everyone deserves to hear your story. So not everyone deserves to know. And then I was like, and maybe they're not ready sometimes as well. But I like your approach, which is just, well, if they're going to ask that question, they're going to get an answer. And like I asked that question before I had losses. I have not asked that question since.
Same. Yeah.
But I definitely asked it before. And my husband was like, how many people did we ask these like things of, I feel so bad, like, and he didn't even feel the loss, of our 2 losses, but he was like, wow, like this is really awful for people to go through. Like I feel so bad. Like
it's accidentally loaded. Like you don't think about it because you spend, I mean, at least over here, you hear about your teenage years, they pretty much teach you how to avoid getting pregnant and make it sound like it's the easiest thing in the world. And then you're like, well, that's not necessary. Like that just doesn't end up to be true later on. Now, maybe it's because, people aren't 17 or 18 when these losses can statistically occur more. But yeah, I don't know. And then as Rob said, so like, I know when you say people say other things, usually the one that we hear a lot is what Rob does. Then the other one is I have 2 at home. We hear that one quite a bit.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
So like it's a way of, as you said, not everyone deserves to hear your story. So it's like kind of a hodgepodge mix of that. It's like I don't really feel like telling you my story. But I also don't feel like leaving her out. So if I say 2 at home, people tend to pause, but then they just move on because I think that kind of tips off people sometimes that you can ask the follow-up if you want. And I remember Rob texted me a couple days ago, when you were telling me about the preschools, the school that, D was looking at. And the question was go through and tell everyone, all your kids at home. And it's like, you're in the spotlight in front of like a whole group of parents. And I felt for you on that one.
Oh yeah.
Well, actually, you dropped that one on him. So
yeah, I mean, I'm never gonna. I totally respect the fact that somebody might say that they don't deserve to hear your story, but I'll be damned if they're not going to hear about her if they invite her. I will just never deny she's part of my family, and if this is just my belief, and this is singular only to me. I'm not. How you choose to go about it, however you, the individual, chooses to go about it, but I choose to go about it in that. And this doesn't cause any harm to anybody. It just gives me fulfillment and allows me to honor her. And that's the most important thing is how the person wants their family reflected in the moment. And that's just me. That's my preference. That's my approach.
Well, it also it took you a long time to get there. Like it's a journey, like the rest of it. Like you didn't wake up day one and do that. Like,
yeah.
And so like it's
years. I mean, it was almost like 4.5, 5 years before I started regularly saying it. Now it's muscle memory.
Yeah, I think for some you have to get past that point where you're like crying your eyes out as soon as you mention it, because
exactly, yeah,
you can't really have a conversation or anything with anyone if you're crying. So
it's true.
Oh well, this is fun as heck. Thank you for inviting us to chat. I love it.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me and telling me your story and sharing that with everyone.
Well, thank you
very much.
Have a lovely
have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, I will. You have a lovely
good
sleep.
day. We'll have a good night. You have a good day, though.
I will. I
Yeah.
will.
Take care.
Bye.
Please note that all speakers, including experts and professionals, express information, views, and opinions that should not be used to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any medical conditions. If you have a medical issue, please consult a qualified professional. Speakers voice their own views, opinions, and conclusions, and they may not reflect the views, opinions, and conclusions of other speakers. Ella Rose, The Joy of Sunflowers, and its sponsors may not endorse all or any of the views, opinions, or conclusions expressed.